Wow. I don't know where you live, but I would be interested in looking at a case like this because it's just stupid. It raises to the level of a stupid scenario. Because what you got is your child's in a private school, but even if your child's in a private school, not only for 504, but also for IDEA, the school has a mandate known as child find. And under the child find mandate, they're responsible to locate and evaluate and identify any child within their geographic boundaries that may have a qualifying disability and be in need of specialized instruction. That's for an IEP. Now, for the 504, obviously that would be more of an internal location and identification for kids that are attending their public school. But the private school would be required, as you've notated, under the 504 aspect. Now, what you're asking for is the public school to evaluate your child for an IEP, which is their mandate. I don't care if the child is enrolled in there or not. It doesn't matter. Just absolutely doesn't matter. Now, why doesn't it matter? It just doesn't. That's what child find is. Okay? Because that includes homeschool, migrant kids, homeless children, transient. It just does not matter. It does not matter what their status is, if they're homeschooled, private schooled, church schooled. It just does not matter. The public school has a responsibility under child find to locate, to evaluate, and to identify. Now, once you identify, and that would be at the end of the evaluation process, once a school identifies, okay, and says, well, your child, let's say, for example, your child does in fact have a qualifying disability and is in need of specialized instruction. Okay, so they would qualify for an IEP. Now, at that point, that is when the consent to provide those services would come in. All right, now if you're in a private school, and unless there's, there is some mechanisms for resource sharing with private schools, but some of that stuff is very flexible in how that's done. But you're not necessarily entitled to an IEP at your private school. But you are entitled to have that evaluation. And then once you're at that eligibility meeting, if the school determines that your child, public school, does in fact determine that your child does qualify, then what they would need to do is offer you services. But what you would likely need to do is enroll your child in the public school. All right? That's completely up to you whether you want those services or not, but that's sort of what would need to happen, unless you can come up with an agreement about providing some services at the public school location. Doesn't absolve them on the evaluation side. That's where you have your case. Because once they identify your child, and if your child does in fact need an IEP, that's when they would get your consent to provide those services. But that consent would be tied to where they could implement that IEP. And likely it would be inside the public school. But if you don't want those services inside the public school, then you can always just say you don't want them. But once again, that is this step. Not this step, not this one, and not this one. Okay? So the whole 6 weeks thing, by the way, sounds like what they're trying to hide behind is the RTI aspect of the law, to where they're trying to sit there and say, well, we're taking a wait and see for 6 weeks, to see how he's doing, which is the response to intervention aspect of the regulations. But that's only if the child find or the suspicion that the child might need an IEP is an internal determination, meaning that the RTI process, other educators or teachers suspected that child may need one. But if the parent makes the request, or if the child's kindergarten or preschool, you do not pause. You don't wait for RTI, response to intervention. There is no 6-week waiting period to sit there and see if other interventions might work. There is no such thing. If the parent makes the request, you stop RTI. You go to the referral meeting, you get consent, and you start the evaluation process. Now they can always reject, moving forward with an evaluation. That's legally stupid, but they could do that. Now, but to sit there and say, well, we're going to delay it with a 6-week, wait and see, or it's their responsibility as a private school to do 504. It's just bunk. I mean, they're in serious violation of child find. And if your child does in fact qualify for an IEP, then at that point, what you can do is that you would, regardless of where, you would be entitled to some corrective action with regards to services for their failure to evaluate when you made that request. And at that point, it would track back to when the public school suspected or should have known that your child was one in need of specialized instruction. And so you would be entitled to some remedial services, compensatory, and not forced to enroll in the public school in order to get those. That would be the punishment for them not following through on their child find mandate. So you'd get a little something there. But, and I don't know where you live, but I mean, that's just a stupid violation on the part of the public school, and they were wrong. Now, if you want to go back and tell them exactly what I told you or what I said, please do that, because maybe the director's just vacuous and just ignorant of this aspect of the law, and the misapplication of that 6-week waiting period. When you've made a good faith request that they need to respond to immediately. Stupid.